Could we all stand for a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We need to probably do a roll call or something just to see who's here.
Of course.
Jackie, please.
Mayor Ed Honey,
Here.
Mr. Ted Maxwell,
Here.
Mayor Tom Murphy,
Here.
Chairman Ned Norris,
Here.
Supervisor Rex Scott,
Here.
Mayor Bob Tesso,
Here.
Chairman Peter Ucapicio,
Here.
and Mayor Joe Winfield.
Here.
Thank you. The next thing on the agenda, and my last thing of my tenure here, is election of officers. And I think the schedule sets up as Mayor Tom Murphy will be chairman of PAG. Mayor Joe Winfield will be vice chair, and Chairman Ucapicio will be treasurer. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. With your pleasure, that's the slate of officers.
I move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
So I was going to
sir.
say my substitute motion that you continue got shot down. So, well, we have a little something for you. All kidding aside, it's been it's always a pleasure to work with you. I know this has been a interesting, difficult year with COVID and trying to manage everything. But I still literally have you at my side, so that's a good thing as we continue. So,
So right, I have your number in my.
yes, you do. I told you, you're gonna have to go do league things. I'm more than happy.
Box of Kleenex.
A box of Kleenex. No, that's for me. So on behalf of all of us.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations. And when I come to your office.
Very
I
nice.
expect to see some candy in there for me.
Thank you very much.
Next is item number 3, which is the consent agenda. At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Now we move to item number 4, which is the public hearing review of the proposed PAG FY 2022-2026 transportation improvement tip. And Mr. Brown will be leading that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the Regional Council. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce this item. This item will proceed, this introduction will precede a public hearing followed by discussion and then a request for action. So the Transportation Improvement Program is prepared by PAG and is a 5-year schedule and budget of proposed transportation improvements in Pima County. The TIP is updated biannually through a multi-step process in association with PAG's member jurisdictions and other implementing agencies. The TIP addresses jurisdictional improvements to diverse elements of the regional transportation system, including national, state, and local highways, transit, aviation, bikeways, and pedestrian facilities. The TIP also responds to various state and federal regulatory requirements for development of the Transportation Improvement Program. Since August, we've been working with various PAG subcommittees and committees and engaged in a public participation process to develop the draft fiscal year 2022 through 2026 TIP. This is a 10-month process, and in your packets for this meeting, we list all of the different meetings that we've had with our member agencies and with our committees, and that includes over 14 public meetings that have been agendized. It's important to emphasize that this is a linear process. So with each step, it builds on the previous step. And so we needed to go through all of our committees and subcommittees before we could develop a full draft TIP. The draft TIP is based on jurisdictional project lists approved by respective subcommittees, the Transportation Planning Committee, and or fiduciary responsible agencies pursuant to each funding source. As with previous TIPs, the full document is updated and built from the current adopted TIP. All elements such as the Title VI analysis, transportation performance measures, assessment, fiscal constraint, and the air quality conformity analysis fulfill federal requirements for TIP development. We focus on the surface transportation funding that's programmed in the draft TIP. And that excludes aviation grants, excludes PAG operations, and excludes self-funded projects. Over 55% of the programming is for the city of Tucson, 37% is programmed for ADOT projects, and 8% is programmed for other agencies, and the other agency breakdown is shown in the table on the right. In terms of just the RTA roadway element projects, the local projects, so that excludes the ADOT projects on Interstate 10 and Brazos Aviation Parkway, 92% of the funds are programmed for the city of Tucson, 4% for Pima County, and 4% for the town of Marana. So this TIP is really focused on ensuring that we deliver on the commitments to the voters in the RTA plan.
That was a typo, that will valid some of Thank you for the clarification.
So in terms of recent committee action, at the March 31st TPC meeting, comments that we received from the committee members were discussed along with PAG responses, and the TPC unanimously approved the draft TIP. At the April 7th meeting, the management committee met and the committee unanimously approved the draft TIP as well. So in terms of the final steps, we've held 2 virtual open house events in April 20th and 21st. We had 65 participants, and we also convened a 30-day public comment period. We had 64 comment submissions, and we want to thank all of the members of the public who attended the open houses and who provided comments to us. All the comments are included in your packet, and also want to say thank you to all the member jurisdiction staff who attended the public open house events and helped us field questions. It's extremely helpful. So today we have the public hearing after this introduction and a request for regional council approval. And then finally, consistent with previous TIP cycles, end of fiscal year rollover funds for projects into the next fiscal year will be incorporated into the final printed TIP in August. So these rollover meetings are extremely important to our member agencies. We have individual meetings with our each jurisdiction where we go project by project and identify the projects that need to have funding rolled over into the next fiscal year. And those will be happening in June, maybe July. So in terms of key considerations for this particular TIP process, per the notice of funding availability memo from August, the TIP is developed in compliance with federal and state regulations. RTA projects comply with the direction of the RTA board to meet the RTA's statutory and financial commitments. And the RTA's 5-year financial plan was unanimously endorsed by the Citizens Accountability for Regional Transportation, or CART committee. The RTA financial plan was affirmed by the RTA board chair, the CART committee chair, the RTA technical management committee chair, and the transportation planning committee chair. Per the RTA board chair, at the RTA board's discretion, cost overruns may be funded by supplemental RTA funding if there is funding capacity in the RTA budget or by other available regionally dedicated dollars. This would be determined on a case-by-case basis and would require approval of an amendment to the project's intergovernmental agreement. So the TIP process cannot get ahead of RTA board action on this. And with that, Mr. Chair and members of the Regional Council, that concludes my introduction. We'd like now to move into a public hearing. Following the public hearing, we'd like to open it up for questions, comments, followed by action. To move into the public hearing, we do need action.
Yep, absolutely. This time I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing. So all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're now in our public hearing. Have we?
Nathan is going to handle that if you don't mind.
Yep.
It's a little bit easier. We have 3 speakers that registered to speak, and if you don't mind, we'll manage the traffic.
Yep.
And because it's all remote.
Thank you, caller. You are now live with the PAG Regional Council. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you will have 3 minutes to address the Regional Council. At the 3-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comment.
Okay, I still hear the board meeting. Are we being called upon?
All right, I mean,
Might need to mute somebody else that's maybe listening in.
All right, greetings.
Oh, it's a lag, I
Please,
see.
please state your name for the record and then continue with your comment. You'll have 3 minutes to address the regional council.
Okay, greetings. I am Margot Garcia of Tucson, and I thank you for this opportunity to appear before you at this public hearing on the TI tip. I have read over many tips during my time of civic involvement. Why is the meeting on my TV showing, on my screen showing my not speaking? But anyway, well, this one is hefts and pages. It's a disappointment in content. It does not take into account the impacts of COVID-19 and the changes all over our year-plus lockdown have brought to our transportation system. It is a continuation of old, outdated ways of doing things. PAG documents have always been held in high regard as a source of accurate information. They are quoted and the data used as a basis for other analyses. As a member of the Tucson Transit Task Force, I was shocked to read that we have 7,223 buses in the SunTrans system. Where have they been hiding them? I emailed the city DTM and asked, where are these 7,000 buses? The reply, that is an error, along with some other errors that were sent to PAG, but they haven't changed the document. So PAG has a public reading and inaccurate document. The reply to my submitted comment regarding this number was that it was a typo. The staff had the opportunity to fix this and they didn't. What other numbers that are wrong are still in the tip pages? My experience is that wrong numbers have a way of multiplying, of getting into all kinds of documents and causing problems. Imagine a federal employee reviewing a grant for more buses that we need to replace our aging stock, looking up the tip to see what it says and finds that there's 7,000 buses. Why should they get funds for any more? That person reasons. Citizens wonder how many buses SunTrans has and finds from the tip there are 7,000 buses. Why do they need any more? And why aren't there more buses running more routes, they wonder. Regional Council, I ask you to ask staff why your memo says there were no changes in content after the public comments. Are they not going to change the 7,000 number to the correct one? And how about the other mistakes that were brought to their attention? Is that not a change in comments, in content? Regional Council, I implore you not to adopt this tip until errors of fact are corrected. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, caller. If you will please mute your computer. You are now live with the PAG Regional Council. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you will have 3 minutes to address the Regional Council. At the 3-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comment. You may now proceed with your comment.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Lyman. 64 people commented on the 22 to 26 tip. 2 years ago, only 2 written comments were submitted. 64 residents of Pima County actually read some portion of the or all of the tip and took the time to submit a written comment. Fortunately, Pima County has an engaged and active community that is interested in working with our government agencies to improve our transportation system. What I find hard to believe is that not one adjustment or change was made to the tip as a result of the 64 public comments submitted. As Mr. Mogini would say, PAG is in compliance because PAG provided a forum for the collection of public comments as required. However, in my opinion, PAG is not compliant because PAG ignored the intent of the rule by not listening or acting on the public feedback. I submitted a rather lengthy comment with very specific questions about the tip, none of which were addressed satisfactorily. Actually, most of what I questioned was not addressed at all. However, I do have a favorite response that I'd like to share with the Regional Council. My comment was regarding item 635, Commuter Services Assistance. This is a PAG program. So the PAG OWP for FY 2022-2023 should provide substantial information on how PAG plans to spend the $985,000 per year of STP funds for commuter services. I reviewed the OWP work element 39 commuter services for specific program expenditures and initiatives. In the OWP, a little over half of the available zero match STP funds are being spent on commuter services in FY 2022. Where is the remaining $482,000 being spent? In FY 2023, the unspent funds are $435,000. Why aren't these funds being spent as programs in the TIP? Is PAG leaving federal dollars on the table that could be used to benefit the region? Or are federal funds being redirected to other PAG programs that aren't in the TIP? So basically, I'm asking why the TIP budget and the PAG budget for a PAG program don't match. The response I received from PAG is the OWP is a separate document, followed by a bunch of acronyms and a word salad that never addressed the question. Would you all accept that answer for a road project where the TIP budget and the project sponsor's budget have a $500,000 difference? That's $500,000 that could be spent on another project, but it also could be wasted or returned to the funder if someone doesn't compare two separate budgets. Lucky for me that the city of Tucson, Pima County, and the Pascua Yaqui have asked that same question in their comments on the PAG OWP. Why don't the TIP budgets match the PAG budgets for PAG programs? Maybe now I'll get a real answer, or better yet, a real solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, caller. You are now live with the PAG Regional Council. Please mute your computer at this time. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you will have 3 minutes to address the Regional Council. At the 3-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comment.
Thank you. This is Bob Cook, and appreciate this opportunity to speak. These comments were vetted and approved by a University of Arizona climate scientist, the region's professor. Here they are. Despite its claims, PAG planning is not leading the region to a climate-friendly future. PAG's draft tip includes the statement that, quote, air quality for our region is being tracked and the amount of emissions from vehicles and other road sources are decreasing at a rapid pace, putting the region on track to achieve all 2045 RMAP targets. In 2009, the Environmental Protection Agency formally stated that greenhouse gases were a public threat, but at the time it did not incorporate them in the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, which apply to transportation-related pollutants. For example, ozone, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and other specific size particles. Since these transportation standards do not apply to carbon dioxide and methane, PAG doesn't have to show federal conformity regarding these climate-changing emissions. This loophole appears in how PAG conflates what they call air quality assessment with what they label as tracking overall greenhouse gas emissions. PAG's air quality assessment, positioned under a graph depicting projected greenhouse gas declines to 2045, includes information on the national standard gases, but none on the greenhouse gases. The so-called tracking of greenhouse gases shown in the graph is not for measuring actual gases, but based on computer simulations used to produce the periodic PAG regional greenhouse gas inventory. Leaked emissions of methane from natural gas production and distribution are not covered in the PAG inventory. Methane is an extremely powerful greenhouse gas, responsible for roughly 30% of warming since the pre-industrial era. In the first 20 years after release, methane is more than 80 times more powerful as a heat-trapping gas than carbon dioxide, justifying its reputation as a global warming multiplier. The oil and gas industry is responsible for approximately half of overall methane emissions. A recent UN study finds that cutting methane is the strongest lever we have to slow climate change over the next 25 years and complements necessary efforts to reduce carbon dioxide. PAG's transportation plans, which tout natural gas burning engines and electric vehicles powered by fossil fuel-based electricity are indirectly promoting more methane emissions. Even setting the methane emission aside, PAG's own 25-year projection of on-road transportation emissions shows that by 2045, our region would still be generating 88% of 2020 greenhouse gases. Currently, in order to avoid the worst climate consequences, the broad scientific consensus is we have to bring greenhouse gas emissions down to zero between 2030 and 2050.
I apologize for the interruption. You are at 3 minutes. Please bring your comments to a close.
Okay. There in plain view is the disconnect between PAG planning and the city and county's commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement. The scariest part of this existential crisis is there is presently no scalable corrective means except ending carbon emissions as the climate progresses toward an increasingly hotter, unlivable planet. If there is to be hope, the jurisdictions with or without the RTA will have to craft real solutions to the climate challenge soon, not illusory plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, at this time, there are no more calls in the queue.
Okay. So at this time, I'll ask one more time, no more comments?
No more comments on the
Thank
phone
you.
queue.
I'll declare the public hearing closed, and then if staff would first like to address any of the comments that were submitted, and then if there's any questions or comments from my fellow council members.
Be happy to, Mr. Chair, members of the council. As Mr. Brown mentioned earlier, we did have comments and the responses to each comments included in your packet. The final version of the tip that was attached to your packet made some of those typo corrections that was brought up. We had a call from Suntran, and they identified that the information that was provided earlier, there were some typos in there. Those were all corrected. So we don't believe there was any other typos or any incorrect information in there. The other question was regarding the tip versus the OWP. OWP, as you all know, is a working document that is currently under development. It is a separate document. TIP is essentially the authorization, and OWP is the appropriation of those funds. Typically what we do, we go through a very extensive process with ADOT and FHWA. If there are any funds that are in the TIP that are eligible to be used in the OWP, that becomes the subject of a contract with ADOT, and ADOT reviews and approves that contract. If you recall at the retreat, we talked about eligibility of funds. So every single fund is reviewed by them. If it's eligible, then it makes it into the OWP. If it's not eligible, then they would ask us to make adjustments. So that process is coming. As far as the commuter services item, the commuter services item, it's a unique funding solution that offers zero match. Typically with federal funds, you have to have at least 5.7 up to 20% local match. With commuter services, there's a provision in the federal guidelines that if you spend those dollars on van pool or carpool, then you don't have to provide a match. So it's great. It's 100% federal dollars. In some cases, if we don't have 100% of those dollars spent on commuter services, we could still use those dollars, but we have to provide the match. And that's what we do. We provide the match, and we use our data collection, traffic modeling, and mapping. All of those are commuter services as well. So all of that, and Paul and his team spend a lot of time on the data collection and modeling, and that's where the additional $400,000 is spent. But then the actual zero match dollars are spent on van pool and carpool services.
Great, thank you. And did I hear from Jamie's presentation that it was unanimously approved to move forward to the council for
Yes,
approval?
TPC Management Committee and staff recommendation is to approve with the understanding that we need to roll over any funds left over from 21. And that's typical. Every year we have funds roll over from projects to the following year. And then also their quality conformity.
Any other questions? No? If not, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion. I move to approve the PAG FY 2022-2026 Transportation Improvement Program.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Chairman, just for the record, I'm not sure we closed the public hearing. Maybe.
Yeah, I did
You
close
do
it.
that. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, well, I thought we voted to go into it, so maybe we should just for the record,
Sure.
vote to go out of it.
To go out of, I'll entertain a motion to go out of, we have a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Thank you, sir.
Any opposed? My pleasure.
Mr. Chair,
Before I move to item number 5,
Mr. Chair, Jamie has a question as well.
I'm sorry if I may. So I think it'd be important to clarify that the motion is specific to what's written there because just approving the,
Yeah, actually, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, Jamie can read the motion and then just verify that that is the motion that was passed. Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
read the
Sorry.
motion, please.
Yeah. So following a public hearing, the Regional Council will be asked to approve the proposed FY 2022 through 2026 Transportation Improvement Program, including the air quality conformity determination and the authorization to carry over any funds from the fiscal year 2020 to 2024 tip that remain unexpended in fiscal year 2021. Thank you.
and then we'll assume you'll make the same motion. And second will be the same. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Finally, the motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members.
And before I move to item number 5, I was remiss when I was handed the gavel to introduce some of our newest members. Ted Maxwell is our new ADOT representative. We're really happy to have you on board. I've had the pleasure to know you for a number of years, and I think you'll be a great addition to the board. So thank you. Mr. Chair, if you have any comments or?
No, I just hope I can keep up with the good work Mike Hammond did on this in this role for the last 6 years.
Right.
Other than that, looking forward to working with you.
Well, I'm sure you will. And I think we did a sort of a pre in the retreat, but Supervisor Scott, welcome to officially to the table, this table, representing the county. And if you'd like to say anything, feel free.
Well, you've got to follow up on single-digit years of Mr. Hammond. I've got to follow up on double-digit years of Ramon Valadez. So I've got an even bigger set of shoes to fill.
Great, thank you. Next couple of items I'll be moving to, and because they're agendized, I'd like to have at least open the discussion. It doesn't mean we have to move forward on it, because I know there's probably maybe some ability to maybe table it or continue it. Chairman?
I was actually going to ask to table 5, 6, and 7 for the board to really examine and look at these. And I don't know, having been on board, some of us have been here a while, and I respect everything that's about PAG and RTA, but I think at this point, because we've not only gotten emails and the medias and stuff like that on concerns on how we operate or how we vote or who carries this, I think it's needed.
Right. And depending on the will of the majority, we can go to each item and again, open it up for, comments, because I'd like to hear from people, and it can be continued or tabled and not have any discussion today. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is Chairman Norris. If I could make a comment at this time, if, as I understand it, that is Chairman Yucopicio's motion to table 5, 6, 7, I would second that motion. But I would like to add the following comment in that having served various terms on the PAG and the RTA, going back to my first term as the vice chairman of the Tohono Nation in 2000, and I think I was on PAG about 2004, 2005, when we had very debated and discussions about the activities of the PAG membership. It was pretty much determined at that time that our activities or our how we were going to work together as members of the regional council was that we would primarily partner with each other. It would be a partnership with all of the jurisdictions that are members of the PAG and the RTA. And I feel very strongly that having received yesterday Mayor Romero's letter to then Chair Honia, that the city of Tucson is a very essential partner in this whole process. And without the city of Tucson's mayor at the table with us, it really puts, it's difficult to really understand the reasoning for the mayor's request to have, in her letter, to have those items tabled. And I think it just would be important for us to make sure that the city of Tucson is represented by the mayor and has an opportunity to participate in the discussions in the interest of our goal to remain partners in this whole process. So I would second Chairman Eucupicio's motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman Norris. We have a motion and a second. Now I'll open it up for discussion. Supervisor Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I am 2/3 in agreement with the motion, but would like to make a substitute motion, which would be to table items 5 and 7, but to discuss item 6.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion and second. Any discussion? And if you'd like to add.
Mr.
reasoning.
Chairman, I agree very strongly with the sentiments that were expressed by the representatives from the 2 tribal nations about the importance of having everybody at the table to talk about these items, especially since they were asked to be added to the agenda by the representative of the city of Tucson. I think it's important that she be here for us to have a full and complete discussion of the items. I also think it's not just respectful to her, but also respectful to the people that she represents to have those items 5 and 7 discussed with her present. Having said that, our next scheduled meeting is not until September. And so I'm concerned that if we don't talk about item 6 today, that we're going to be waiting until September to talk about these items, unless there's an emergency meeting scheduled by either you or the vice chair. So that's why I offer this substitute motion with all due respect.
Great. Any further discussion on that?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Because I'm through being politically correct, so I just speak my mind. I may be gone in June. I've got family out of town and stuff like that. And I don't think you should have a meeting in June if I can't be there, because I have very strong opinions on this stuff. And I think a lot of times we have to remember, I don't care how big you are or how small you are. Everybody on this board gets 1 vote. And for us to change our entire meeting schedule because of 1 vote, I really think is wrong. I was chairman until just a few minutes ago when Mayor Murphy took over. And I have letters from Mayor Romero wanting 55% vote capacity. Well, that won't work here because the other 8 of us are just going to be a bunch of pretty faces around the table, and the city of Tucson is going to make all the decisions. I don't think that's acceptable to any of us. You know, so I mean, we have to kind of look at some of this stuff in reality and live in the real world. You know, my community is very successful and we're doing pretty well financially in every other way and stuff. And I just think if we start messing with PAG and the RTA later, and making major changes in them, we're going to destroy something that's been really good to all of us for the last 15 years. That's my comment.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Yes, I want to follow up with, my thought to the second motion's been made. I don't think it was to change anything, sir. I don't think it's basically a discussion item. And I think that's where I differ with whoever's, we have done such a beautiful job for the region, keeping us together. Like you said, small or big, or some tribal or non-tribal. We have members that live in every single one of your jurisdictions. So it does matter. Different than just considering your town or the city. We live everywhere. We've been here before 1500. So we care, and we care about every single jurisdiction. The question for me, gentlemen and ladies in this room, is having that conversation with as many people here, including if it's the city of Tucson. That's it.
Right.
Not to change anything or not to, and if changes come, it'll come from all of us. But that's really what I think Mr. Norris is saying. I'm saying that even if we did things and town wasn't represented here, then we would wait. What's your comments, whether you're a straight shooter or not? And that's really why I propose just tabling or continuing this conversation within ourselves, because we always did that as PAG, as RTA. And now for some reason, things from the outside, all these social media things, make us decide which way we're gonna stand or how we do that. I haven't decided that. All I'm saying is let's have the conversation.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Don't have any comments on the merits of item 5 because that is something that I hope can be discussed at a later meeting. I very much appreciate Mayor Honey's comments, especially given his years of service to the PAG Regional Council and the RTA Board. I just think it's important that all members be present, especially the member who put that item and item 7 on the agenda so that we can have a full discussion. I certainly intend to offer my own opinions about item 5 and item 7 if they are continued to another meeting. But for right now, my point is just that I think it's important that everybody who has input into those items be present when we discuss them, especially if they're the person who added them to the agenda in the first place. And then with regard to item 6, if this motion passes, I have a motion related to item 6 that would be respectful of the plans that Mayor Honey referred to.
That I'd have a suggestion on 6 as well when we get there.
Yes.
Before I go to you, I think I heard
Chairman?
Norris wanted to
Yes.
make a comment. Yes, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I do not dispute any of the comments that Chairman Ucopicio has made, and also the most recent speaker. I do question, though, the appropriateness of hearing at least any of the arguments against whatever Mayor Romero is asking to do, given the fact that the mayor is not here to rebut or to provide any of her position on that. And so I agree that we need everybody at the table, including Mayor Romero, and so that we can address these issues. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Mayor Winfield.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to speak. What I understood is that the motion at the moment is the meeting schedule. So item 6, is that correct?
No, the motion is to table 5 and 7.
I thought there was.
I made the.
I thought there was an amendment.
I have it as a motion to table 5, 6, and 7.
Yes,
That's the
and then it
motion
came with
that was recognized first.
Right.
So we have that sitting on the table
And
unless
second.
there is either both those, the gentlemen that made the original motion want to convert it. I believe we need to settle that motion.
Settle that
first.
motion
And
first.
then if not, if that doesn't pass, then we have another motion, an alternative
Okay.
motion from Supervisor Scott.
Right.
And I can't remember honestly if that's been seconded.
It was.
It was seconded. Yes.
Yeah, that's where the confusion for me is. that
Right.
with
So
the
right
second
now,
motion-
the motion on the table is to table 5, 6, and 7.
And that motion can't be amended. Is that what?
Only, Mr. Chair, only if the chairman that made the motions want to agree to change their first and second, their
Right.
motion and their second.
I stand with the motion I made, and it was seconded by Don Alden.
Yep. So to clarify, if that is defeated, we can go to potentially a second motion for there. Right. Any further discussion?
So I have a question for clarification. If that motion passes, does that mean that we will not meet again until September?
Correct. Unless a special meeting or
Let's-
I call a meeting.
Chair, and they call a special meeting, which I look forward to, if that's where everybody's present.
Right.
And that doesn't require a motion. You can call a special meeting.
Well, one of the, since we're still in the discussion phase, so I can comment, correct? So what I was gonna suggest, if this dies and we have 6 come up as a separate item, I was gonna ask the council the new officers, myself, Mayor Winfield, and the chairman, could get together with staff and come up with a potential, maybe earlier, schedule, not committing to, we'd come back to the council or have a meeting even before September, if that's what the three officers would have a conversation and agree to. And if that is the feeling that we'd like to have something to address those three items, I'd be willing to have something earlier, but, probably not the summer if we really want all of the folks here. If we're talking about a September meeting, maybe an early August meeting coming out of the summer recess, something along those lines is what I would consider in consultation with the three officers.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
as the new person on the board, one, it looked like we were about to set a record for the shortest meeting we've had in a long time, I guess, for PAG and RTA, if we did continue all those. My biggest concern on this issue is, one, I fully support the idea of tabling 5 and 7, completely with the idea of coming back. It's to have that conversation without Mayor Romero here. It's not, especially if we were to come to a conclusion or even continuation, is not constructive, and it's not a regional approach. We want to have all the voices at the table, I believe, to have that discussion. My concern with tabling 6 or continuing 6 this time is just that. This is an issue right now. It's in the press. We don't want them to necessarily have the press define our conversations, but it's getting a lot of attention. It's building a lot of momentum, and people are already taking sides in the community. And that leads me to believe that if we wait till September to finally address those issues, we may miss an opportunity to once again demonstrate that we're here as a regional council with a regional focus, and we want to have everybody at the table as part of the discussion. So I would highly suggest we continue the conversation on item 6, just so that we can determine if there's a possibility. It's not going to be easy over the summer, but again, there's only 9 of us. With 9 of us, there's a chance we could find one day in there, and we always do have the remote opportunities as well. That I think maybe one of the only benefits in my mind coming out of the whole pandemic will be the increased opportunity for remote participation. But my concern is if we wait till September to have this, the public dialogue and community, as well as honestly, each and every one of the elected councils and mayors will continue to have this discussion. Yet we will not have had the opportunity to try to address it internally first.
Thank you. And realizing the only way we can get there is to defeat the original motion.
Okay,
To
that's
have
what
the
I wanted
discussion.
clarification. Thank you.
Yes. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Chairman Norris, and I just wanted to comment that, yes, I concur with, who was just speaking right now?
That was Mr. Maxwell, Ted Maxwell.
Mr. Maxwell, I agree with that as well, too. Thank you.
Well, I would take that as potentially a friendly amendment to the original, but it would take a friendly amendment.
I agree with that.
You agree with
As long
that?
as we discuss the number 6.
Okay.
And plan a meeting somewhere. I'm available all summer, by the way.
Okay. Almost me as well.
We don't take a vacation or nothing.
I know, you're hardworking here. I know that.
And I think that brings us together closer and really having a good dialogue like we used to have before, instead of letting the medias take over and pick us apart and tell us,
What we all said, right?
And I really appreciate that. Thank you, Chairman Norris and Sir, Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you.
So do we have enough clarification, Mr. Benvenido?
Mr. Chair, it sounds to me like we have an agreement to amend the original motion.
Right. Would you
So
like to
that's-
repeat what you
But just
understand?
repeat the motion, which to me is now to table items 5 and 7 only.
Only. Any further discussion on that? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, which brings us to item number 6.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would propose that we begin to conduct monthly meetings in July through November. And then in November, have a discussion about the schedule for meetings in 2022. But I think there is wisdom for some of the reasons that have already been expressed by my colleagues to begin to conduct monthly meetings in July. We are close to June right now. I think it could be done later in July, just like this meeting is later in May. But then I would suggest monthly meetings through November with a plan to discuss the 2022 schedule in November. That's a motion. It's a wordy one, but it's a motion.
Okay, do I have a second so we can further discussion on that?
I would second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Now we'll open it for discussion. I personally would be okay with that. One, July is, better than June, especially if we go into later July. We already were going to have 2 meetings during that time frame already. So I appreciate, I was a little worried you were going to come with a motion that it would be at monthly meetings ad nauseum, which I would not be personally in support of. So I would be okay with that and scheduling. Chairman?
Sure, just have we checked with the staff and see what kind of schedules they have and what they would have to do to set aside the monthly? That's why if the monthly doesn't work, every other month, I think would give them time to prepare and get all the data and everything
Right.
that we need as a board. So that would be my recommendation to the motion, only because we can say whatever we want to, but then we need to figure out with
And it's a lot of work
how
to
you
put
guys
this
are
together.
staffed or what you're doing, and as the administrative part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would, if you are willing to do that, I would like to explore that conversation with the officers and then schedule those meetings consistent with what you all recommended, but coordinate with officers and then schedule those meetings between now and November. I think that will give the officers a chance to really look at what needs to happen during the next 6 months and be able to call those meetings at the pleasure of the chair and the vice chair.
And to your comment, thank you for that, because let's say the officers get together and all of those can be made except for one, for instance, because there's maybe nothing to talk about or scheduling for staff is too difficult. I would agree with that. I hope you might be comfortable with.
Very comfortable.
Thank you.
Logistics are important.
They are, because again, part of all this conversation was wanting to have everybody there.
Yes.
So it literally could come down to, and we'd work really hard as the 3 officers. I wouldn't want to have a meeting if one of my colleagues was going to be absent, or we're going to be right back into the same point we are right now. So if you could, would you like to amend the motion to allow the officers to work with staff and then schedule as closely to what you brought up?
If that's acceptable to Chairman Norris, who was the second, that is acceptable to me as well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chairman Norris, is that okay with you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one thing I would recommend is that we all provide our schedules for the summer.
Yes.
I do know there are, after a year of not having any travel over the summer, I think there's going to be several of us that are going to travel over the summer. So by providing that information to the officers or to the executive director, that can be considered. And what I see this motion's about is not waiting September to have discussion on items 5 and 7. So,
Correct.
So the important thing is finding one meeting, all members of the council can participate in between then. And then if we need to have more meetings from that point forward, we can bring that up at a later meeting as well. So I like the motion to leave it up to the officers to support that as well.
Great. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for a spirited discussion.
Wanted your first meeting to be live.
I had no other anticipation of that. Having no more further business of the PAG. Adjourn. From PAG. Make it too exciting. The RTA meeting.
We call the RTA meeting to order. Item number 2 is the election of officers.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I can assist with that. Similar to PAG, the rotation of officers, since you've been acting as the acting chair, now moving to the chair. Chairman Jacopicio was currently the second vice chair. He would be the vice chair, and then Mayor Honey would be the second vice chair. That's the slate of officers recommended by the chair.
Make a motion to approve that as presented.
Second.
Have a motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 3, approval of consent agenda.
Approve consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries. Moving on to item number 4, RTA budget, fiscal year 2021, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, members of the RTA board, I'm going to bring before you today the fiscal 22 budget for your approval. The budget development process consists of a number of items that are outlined here on this slide. First, we begin by doing updated revenue estimates. The revenue estimates that are in the tip were prepared back in last summer. We are now looking at an additional 11 months of this current fiscal year that we have data on, and we're going to be basing our revenue estimates on it. The expenditure budget, however, is concurrent with the tip that you just approved. With this action, we'll be adopting our preliminary or our budget. We will be conducting a rollover of our unexpended funds from fiscal 21 over the course of the summer. Once we cut our final checks, we'll begin that process, and then we will present to the board an amended budget at their September meeting. In terms of our revenue recommendation, our fiscal 21 TPT budget or RTA sales tax budget, if you will, adopted was for $77.7 million. Our first 11 months of fiscal 21, we've collected almost $91 million. So we're way ahead of what we had originally estimated. We're presently at a 9.93% year-over-year growth. We had forecast in our budget a 15% decline because if you'll recall, when we developed last year's budget in May, we were in a much different condition with just emerging from the stay-at-home orders. Our Eller Economic Business Research Center estimate that was done just prior to the onset of the pandemic gave us a forecast this year of $94.39 million. That is what we are recommending for this year's budget, even though we will exceed that with the current year revenues. We feel that much of what we're seeing this year is probably stimulated by federal CARES Act funding. So our recommendation is to continue to be conservative, although not nearly as conservative as we had previously been recommending. In addition to that, we have other revenues. These are largely transit related. They amount to $8.831 million. This gives us a total fiscal 22 RTA revenue budget of $103.221 million. In terms of our expenditure budget, they again, as I mentioned, are consistent with fiscal, or rather the PAG 22 to 26 tip. In the RTA portion of the tip, for the roadway element, we're looking at $11.254 million of RTA funding toward the roadway element. The broader roadway element will be receiving, or from the other sources of funds, will be just over $52 million. So it is a fairly significant amount of funding available in this coming fiscal year. We have safety element funding that'll be coming from surface transportation or federal funds that are not part of this budget, but they amount to a little over $2 million. Our environmental and economic vitality element will be getting $2.354 million of RTA funding. And our transit element consists of $28.202 million of RTA funding, and that includes those other revenues that I mentioned earlier. Additionally, in the budget, we do have our debt service on our existing bonds. That amounts to $29.75 million. The Series 2011 bonds will be retired next week. So we will then only have payments remaining on the Series 2014 and 2017 bonds. We expect our administrative expenses at about 1.1 or $1.991 million. That includes the cost of the performance audit that we have to pay for that's mandated by state statute, as well as audit services, the cost of collection by the Arizona Department of Revenue. They bill us annually for the cost of collecting sales tax and other administrative expenses. That is also includes the 1% for PAG's operations. Total RTA fiscal 22 expenditure budget is $73.551 million. So looking at it, revenue and expenditures, we have a balance of $29.67 million. That is higher than what was shown in the constraint table in the tip. In the constraint table of the tip, we were showing a $20.2 million amount available for supplemental funding. This is increased by that increased revenue that we're seeing as a result of the better conditions than we had estimated early on. The next steps, again, as I mentioned, is to begin going into the rollover. That's where we cut our final checks and review our projects with our jurisdictional partners. Make sure any funding that is needed that's in the current tip, the fiscal 21 tip, rolls over into fiscal 22 if there are additional expenses anticipated for projects. And in addition to that, we'll roll over the additional funding that we collected this fiscal year. And at that point in time, we'll know what that is. With that, we'll also look at other sources of funding to see how they're performing. We expect the HERF 12.6 to be doing better, and we also expect additional funding of CARES Act that'll be coming down to the region. So we will have a fairly large amount of funding that will be available to program at the board's discretion following a notice of funding availability. And with that, I think I just covered that. We will work with the CART and the Technical Management Committee to review supplemental funding eligibility and to make recommendations to the RTA board. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report, and we are requesting your approval of the Resolution 2021-006 for the RTA's fiscal 21-22 budget.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Cool. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 5. Extension of the RTA Citizens Advisory Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I have a two-part motion. I would first move to reappoint the 23 members from the current Citizens Advisory Committee to a new term ending in June of 2024. And I would also, as part of that motion, ask that an item be added to our next scheduled agenda to discuss with all members present the addition of up to 12 members to the CAC to bring it up to its original size of 35. That would be my motion.
Second.
You have a second?
Mr.
Second.
Mayor Winfield.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Just to a little further discussion, I think we owe an extraordinary debt of gratitude to the members of the CAC who've been working for the last 3 years, especially everything that they've had to deal with during a global health crisis. Their experience and their knowledge is definitely needed moving forward. But when the CAC was originally constituted, it was envisioned to be up to 35 members. There are 12 of the original members who have either dropped off or who have indicated that they do not want to be reappointed. That's why the second part of my motion was made, so that we could talk at our next meeting about adding up to 12 additional members to bring some new perspectives and complement the work that has already been done by the current members.
And would your, Mr. Chair, could I just add a comment? And would your expectation be that it would be similar on how those original members, there was an application process set up to the CA, to staff and CAC to help select those, or are you thinking that we might be part of that process, or it's open for dialogue?
It seems to me, and I defer to Mr. Benavides, it seems to me that we need to follow the same process as was followed to appoint the original members. But I'd certainly like there to be discussion about that process for the new members at our next meeting. But I read everything that he put in the packet about appointing CAC members, and certainly want to stay within what we are required to do by both law and policy. But I do want to have that discussion with all members present.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure we all received an email, I believe everybody's on it, from a Rachel Wilson. So as part of that consideration, there was a committee for those who were not selected to be on the original CAC committee. And I was on that committee as part of the 35. I fully support continuation of those 23. Those folks have given several years of effort on this. And there is going to be some period of time needed to catch up on the new members to get to where we sit. So I think having that continuity, but yet adding new voices to the conversation would be good, I think, for everyone involved. But I want to make sure that we're not going to, at the next meeting when we talk about this, we need to make sure we haven't already circumvented other things that are already in process. So there's some of those folks who were not selected served on the committee that was made to keep them informed and going. They were also told at the time that they were going to have the opportunity to be some of those replacements. So I think we just need to have that in consideration as we decide how to go forward with the selection or the completion of the Citizens Advisory.
Well, after Mr. Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I talked to Rachel Wilson yesterday. She doesn't like me. Talked to her for a long period of time. And Ms. Wilson, who I don't know and maybe a wonderful person, said we should choose people for the CAC for the existing new people, but using ethnicity, sexual preference, and those types of things as guides to appoint people to the CAC committee. I am 100% against that. I don't want to preclude anybody because of any of those things from being on the committee. But if a group comes in pushing that as criteria, and Mr. Scott, Supervisor Scott and I had this conversation earlier this week, I think we're going to be in big trouble. I agree with your original motion that we use the exact same formulation that we used before. Appoint the people that are still there and use the same process. But we have to be pretty careful here, people, because if some of that stuff that Miss Wilson asked me that needed to be included is included, we're going to have a nightmare.
Mr. Chairman.
So he's the chair.
I agree with everything that Mayor Honey just said and wanted to ask Mr. Benavides, the voluntary demographic form that was in the packet, how is that allowed to be used in terms of, how was it used last time? How could it be used again?
Do you want to respond to that?
I did read that, but I'm not sure about the background of how it came to be and
how accurate. the
But yeah,
data
just
is on
if
it.
I may, so the form is typically after a selection is made.
Okay,
After a selection is made, then you put it out there and ask them to share whatever information they would like to share with us. So
Got it.
now we have a good data to use moving forward. It's
thank
not,
you for
it's not
clarifying
before
that.
selection, it's after selection is made.
thank you for clarifying that.
Before he made his motion, Mr. Chair, if I could just say a few things. I was actually gonna make a motion to also table this one before we move like this. I don't know about everybody else, but is this the first time we're looking at the actual thing after reading it? And I don't know if we need further discussion on some of the things that we're concerned about. And that's one thing that you mentioned towards the end of your motion is having that discussion. And for me, I think that that's great, but are we really ready? And I do agree with you that the ones that are there, when we thank them for serving, we want to make sure they can carry on and teach the new ones. But is it time today to get that approved and make a motion when I think we still have some work to do on this item itself?
What, Mr. Chair, I thought I understood the motion, though, that we approve the people moving forward that's on there and then having the discussion at the next meeting. So I think it meets the intent of what you're saying, Chairman. That's the way I understood it.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And Mr. Chair, as I understand, again, I'm a new person on the board, but as I understand this, without the continuation, the vote to continue the current members as well as continue the CAC, it will actually expire before our next meeting.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we don't want to let happen. So, but I agree, we don't need to decide how we're going to fill or how it's going to go forward. That's a further discussion point as possible too. And I want to thank Mayor Honey for reaching out. That was. I'm not sure-
Courageous conversation.
But I'm glad. Thank you for reaching out.
Mr.
Is
Chairman.
it known that the 23 current members do want to be extended? That is,
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mayor, we did reach out to all of them and they expressed an interest to continue. And we have their information about where they live, where they work. So we'll bring all that back to you at the next meeting as well. And then you can talk about how you want to proceed with the additions.
I believe the motion was specific to 12, filling 12 vacancies. I just want, if there were 13, could we fill?
So
Just one-
23.
Up
have
to
confirmed.
35. is
So
basically-
23 have confirmed they want to continue. So if you wish to use 35 as your number, then the balance would be 12 more.
And Mr. Chairman, that's why I made the motion to say up to 12, because the CAC was originally conceived to be a membership of 35. We may have discussion next time that arrives at a number less than that, but I think we should at least set that threshold for purposes of this motion.
And if you recall, if I may, Mr. Chair, so 35 came from 50% of the applicants at the time. So there was roughly 70 applications and the two chairs decided 35 is a good number. 50% of everybody that applied should be appointed.
I have one more question. Of the remaining 12, they have to be approved by this board, but the suggestion of who those individuals are really is staff and leadership, right? Is that correct?
So last time the process we used was the two chairs, the chair from the PAG and the chair from RTA, reviewed all the applications. We provided all the data, all the information they needed. And then between the two chairs, they made a nomination to the full board and the full board made their appointment.
What I'm concerned about after talking to Rachel Wilson, I do have her number I can give it to, is I don't want the appointment to become a political football. Up until about a year and a half ago, I didn't even know who from Marana was on the CAC board. And I asked you for a copy of the addresses and found out there were two people who I knew, but I didn't even know they were on the board. I don't want this to become a political football where people are chosen because of ethnicity and different things. I want them to be chosen because, the senior leadership thinks they're the best people to serve our community. And I'm really concerned about the CAC becoming a political entity, and it shouldn't be. It should be a service entity for our community.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, obviously because of some of the topics that have come up recently, We have worked with our attorney to make sure that we're following the law. So we'll make sure that as part of the process that we bring back to you, we'll make sure that our attorney has a role in the process to make sure that the selection is made purely based on whatever criteria you set, as long as that criteria is in compliance with the law.
One thing I'd like to point out, Mr. Chairman, with regard to geographic representation among the 23 members who asked to be reappointed, I note that there is no representative from either the Pasco Yaqui or Tohono O'odham nations, nor is there a representative from South Tucson. Unless tribal representatives were indicated by where they lived and not their membership in the tribe, but that was what I noticed in the original 23.
So we'll bring all that information to you once obviously we have the process laid out. With the original 35, we had members that worked in South Tucson and we had members that worked in sales. So we tried to balance that with the place of employment as well. But those are the kind of things we need to bring back to you and for your consideration at that time.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Norris?
thank you. No, I was just going to point out, as Chairman Yucupicio has pointed out already, but I just wanted to make sure that for the record, we realize that in the letter I received yesterday, this is one of the items that Mayor Romero had asked to be tabled as well. There's already a motion on the floor, and I respect that, but I also just wanted to say that in total respect for Mayor Honea, I think that based on those comments that he made, I think that this does warrant some very critical discussion amongst the RTA. And I think in having said that, I think it's important for us at least to allow Mayor Romero the opportunity to state her reasoning, which I don't know. I know what I read in her letter, and that's about it. But I think that we need to afford her the opportunity to state her reasoning for asking that this item be tabled. So for the record, I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, to respond to that comment, I appreciate the motion because I would be strongly in favor of the people that have had that history to continue. So, I mean, I think that that's why I support your motion. We can certainly do that. And then to the chairman's point, that I think that is a discussion, that we can have because we will have the meeting when all of us are there for that second half. But I'm strongly in favor of continuing it, and it is time sensitive of not letting it sunset. So I'll be in support of your motion.
Same, I do, and I never read the letter, but I'm also talking about other letters and emails that we've gotten on the actual board of citizens, on how we choose the composition and all that, which Mayor Honey brought up. But I think to retain what we have and the knowledge and everything that we have is the right thing to do at this time. But it's also right to make sure that all of us are involved, including Mayor Romero, on the composition of now and in the next few years, how that committee is going to be built.
Mr. Chairman?
Chairman Norris.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I concur with Chairman Yucupicio's comments. Thank you.
Hey, if there's no more discussion, can we repeat the motion, please?
Certainly. My motion was to reappoint the 23 people on the current CAC who wish to be reappointed for a term ending June 30th, 2024. And that we have an item on the next scheduled meetings agenda to discuss the addition of up to 12 new members of the CAC who would have the same term of office.
We have a second.
I second it.
Okay. Okay, that's it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who's an aye?
Oh, okay.
I was a little delayed. That was an aye in favor of the motion. Thank you.
It's that internet, moving on to item number 6, RTA project implementation update.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Aye.
Who's an aye, I guess.
Oh, okay. Norris?
I was a little delayed. That was an aye in favor of the motion. Thank you.
It's that internet,
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion. I had a couple of legal questions and I think we have the ability to
RTA project
ask
implementation
legal
update.
questions in executive session.
Mr. Chair.
So I'd make a
Aye.
motion that we move to executive session.
I guess.
Oh, okay. Norris?
I was a little delayed. That was an aye in favor of the motion. Thank you.
I would second that motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion. I had a couple of legal questions and I think we have the ability to
RTA project
ask
implementation
legal
update.
questions. I usually do at my town council meeting when I have questions for our attorney to go in executive session to have a clarify and have a conversation with our attorney.
Just for clarity, which item that you need to say? Which item?
Item number 6.
Chairman Norris, if you don't mind, we have a phone number for you, and we're going to move into the next room, obviously, with a vote of the
Question I usually do at my town council meeting when I have questions for our attorney.
You have a
to go
motion
in
and a second.
executive session to have
All in
a
favor?
clarify.
All opposed?
Just for clarity, which item that you need to say? Which item?
Item number 6.
Chairman Norris, if you don't mind, we have a phone number for you.
There's not enough of
We're
us
going to
to
move
hear.
into the next room, obviously, with the vote of the
Question I usually do at my town council meeting when I have questions
like we have Mr. Chairman Norris on, is that correct? Chairman Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
Do we have a motion to close?
Motion, come on.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Still happy. Still has
All
that
right.
loop now.
Do we have a motion to close?
Motion, come on.
Still have that
Second.
feedback.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good.
We didn't have a motion to close the executive.
All right, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then
Members of
Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Still happy. Still has
All
that
right.
loop now.
Do we have a motion to close?
Motion, come on.
Still have
Second.
feedback.
All in favor?
Aye.
Projects previously.
We didn't have a motion to close the executive.
All right, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Still happy. Still has
All
that
right.
loop now.
Do we have a motion to close?
Motion, come on.
Still have
Second.
feedback.
All in favor?
Aye.
Projects that are now under construction.
We didn't have a motion to close the executive.
All right, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Still has
All
that
right.
loop now.
Do we have a motion to close?
Motion, come on.
Still have
Second.
feedback.
All in favor?
Aye.
Projects that are now under construction.
We didn't have a motion to close the executive.
All right, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right.
Do we have a motion to close?
Come on.
Still have
Second.
feedback.
All in favor?
Aye.
Projects that are now under construction.
We didn't have a motion to close the executive.
All right, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then
There's a lot of.
Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right.
Do we have a motion to close?
Still have
Second.
feedback.
All in favor?
Aye.
We didn't have a motion to close the executive.
All right, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Acquisition.
Do we have a motion to close?
Still have
Second.
feedback.
All in favor?
Aye.
Likely.
We didn't have a motion to close the
All right, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go first and then Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have a motion to close?
Second Street Viaduct.
Second.
That will likely
All
go.
in favor?
Aye.
Calendar year, likely to go construction.
All right, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, we do have a couple of presentations for you and Mr. Norris will go
The next
first
project after that.
and then Mr. Benavides. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Designs complete, agricultural work is ongoing. Second Street Viaduct. That will likely go. Calendar year, likely to go construction.
All right, Mr. Chair.
Underpass.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, presentations for you with live stream the meeting, if you don't mind. Mr. Norris?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Designs complete, agricultural work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Meeting will be recessed.
Not an open meeting.
Do whatever you want.
That's always good.